welcome back to the shop. Just finished a nice kitchen table for my son and his family, and it's 40 by 72, made out of all cherry. It was a fun project to build, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching. I started out by flattening the rough lumber. Here I'm using a Triton 3¼ horsepower router with a 2.5-inch flattening bit. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because my joiner only has an 8-inch capacity, and these boards were far greater than that. So I did the flattening on one side, and then I could run it through the planer on the other side, and both surfaces would be exactly parallel and ready to go. Because of the shape of the stretcher and the size of it, I had to laminate some of the cherry together to make the shape that I needed. You'll see here that I'm using butcher paper to trace out the shape of the stretcher. So I got the shape dialed in on one side of the stretcher, and then I was able to fold the butcher paper back over itself and duplicate that exact shape on the other side, and that way it was nice and symmetrical. Once I had the shape marked out, it was just a matter of taking it over to the bandsaw and cutting to the line. Once I was done with the bandsaw, I used my hand plane to square up the bottom of the bottom stretcher, and I also off camera did some roundovers with a roundover bit and a router, and did some sanding to get the stretcher to its final shape. After that stretcher was done, it was time to work on the rest of the base. And here I'm working on the legs, and I'll work on the bottom leg supports as well. And as you see, I'll dry fit everything in the end before I glue it up. I designed this table with the legs being at a 10-degree angle, and here you'll see me making those cuts. And for the bottom leg supports, I laminated two pieces together. Here I'm putting that 10-degree angle on the bottom leg supports. And that same 10-degree angle is being put on the legs here. My table saw blade is not deep enough to go all the way through that cut, so I had to finish it up with a Japanese pole saw. Here I'm cutting in a dado on the lower leg supports so the stretcher fits into it. And you'll see that I didn't have the angle just right, so I had to tweak it with the handsaw and chisel. Just a little bit more touch-up sanding and the stretcher is ready to be assembled. And for the assembly, I used a Forstner bit and a regular jewel bit in succession to countersink for the 5-inch lag screws that I'm using to put these things together. It's time to glue up the legs. I wanted these joints to be rock solid, so I used Type Bond 3 wood glue. I also added half-inch dowels to the joints, and that will ensure these things are never going to come apart. I cut the legs a hair long, and here I'm just uh, making sure they're all at the same height and angle. And just like the bottom leg glue joints, I'm reinforcing the top leg glue joints with dowels. For the tabletop frame assembly, I use dominoes. Unfortunately, my pipe clamps were a hair too short, so I had to improvise a little bit. So now it's time to do a dry fit on the tabletop support. I will say that it was really tight. It was tough to, it was difficult to get the pieces together at times. Then next it was onto the glue up of the tabletop assembly. Here I'm using a router and a pattern bit to insert some dados for the cross pieces. Now it's time to glue up the tabletop. As you can see, I'm using dominoes for alignment on these as well. Here I'm finishing up the joints of the cross members on the tabletop frame. And as with the other joints, I'm using Titebond 3 for these joints. Here we're doing a final sanding on the bottom of the tabletop so I can get it ready for finishing. For the finish, I'm using Natura One Coat. It's basically the same as Rubio Monocoat, but 2/3 of the price. I get it on Amazon. Now you may notice while I'm finishing this, you'll see some sapwood. Now this is the bottom of the tabletop, so it won't be seen anyway. The top, I made sure that the top of the tabletop didn't have the sapwood showing. The leveling feet install here was pretty straightforward. To attach a tabletop to the tabletop frame assembly, I used quarter 20 threaded inserts. Once the tabletop was secured to the frame assembly, I was able to cut it to the final size. And I also put a 20-degree bevel on the edges. One last final sanding of the tabletop and Natura 1 coat, and the table's finished.